Kadosh, Boker Or, Masechet Bava Kamma Daf Yudaled Amud Aleph 114a1. We were talking about yesterday something very, very interesting. And we said that if somebody's going to move to Babylonia, meaning he lives in Israel and he's going down to Babylonia, or from Babylonia to Israel, and what happens is that he comes and he starts testifying, right, about someone, about a Jew with the Goyim. And by testifying about this Jew, about the Goyim, he's going to take out money from the Jew. We put him in Nidui, an excommunication. What's the reason? So he said, because they take out money by one person. Meaning we know that in order to take out money from someone, you always need two witnesses. They do it through one witness. So because of that, that's why we put them in Nidui. We put them in excommunication. Okay? This is where we're starting today's daf. Okay? So it says, Velo Amran Ela Chad. What are we talking about? Right? Only with one person. So we said that that's only if it's going to be that there's going to be one ed keneged the Israel, meaning one witness against Israel. But if there are be'emet two edim, so therefore you can't do it. Why are you going to put him in a cherem? At the end of the day, right? This Jew that was going, whether it's from Israel to Babylonia or Babylonia to Israel, at the end of the day, he didn't do anything bad. Remember, he was testifying. It was basically against him against the Kuti. And what happened is that when he was him against the Kuti, right? You just pass the pencils. Yeah, he says when it's going to be him against the Kutis, what happened is that we're talking about that if it's going to be one witness, then we put him in Nidui. But obviously, if it's going to be two witnesses, we're not going to put him in Nidui. So says the Gemara, V'chad nami lo maran ela bedine de magista. Also, in the case of one witness, we're not going to say this only in a bet mishpat of kfarim, a bet mishpat of villages,
like a bunch of hillbillies.
Exactly, that they don't know how to judge. Aval beit davar, we're talking about a bet mishpat of the shliton, so there's no isur. Inu nami chad amumat hashadule, because they also do everything according to ed echad, right? They come and they put a shavua, and they're not going to be mechavim mamon. Just like Dinei Israel, which means at the end of the day, if you're going to testify, but it's only going to come out the exact same rule as Dinei Israel, we're not going to put you in Nidui, right? And again, we're not talking about a Jew between a Jew, because then you have a big problem, because then obviously you're not allowed to go to a non-Jewish court. We're talking about between a Jew and a Kuti, okay? That's the concept. It's between a Jew and a Kuti, and now you're going to come and you're going to testify against the Jew. So if you're one witness, so we're going to put you in Nidui. What are you doing, right? Because they're going to take out money from one witness, and you're not allowed to do that. But if it's going to be the exact same concept of, how do you call this? Exact same concept. So then that, yes, you should have it. Yeah, there shouldn't be any problem. Why? Because you didn't do anything worse than what it was normal in a normal Jewish court, right? Which is going to be mechayev a shivua. So says the Gemara, Amar Ravashi comes and he says, Ki avina berav Ravuna, right? He says, Ibailan. So when we were in the Bet of Midrash of Ravuna, we had this safek. Adam Hashuv, the Samchi Aleke Betre. When you have a person that's an Adam Hashuv, sometimes a person is so important, for you it's like two witnesses. Yeah? So therefore, Mabki Mona Pume, Veloy Baile Sude, do we take out money from him and therefore we don't need witnesses? Or Dilmar, maybe given the Adam Hashuv, or maybe since it's an Adam Hashuv, Lo Matzi Mishtam Eluhu, right? You cannot get out of it, basically, right? And therefore, Matzela Sude, and therefore you could actually come and you could actually testify. Right? So he comes and he says, Teiku. We don't have an answer. What does that mean? We know, for example, I'm going to ask you a question. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu believed upon you? Yeah? Chaim Kanievsky. Yeah? You have Chavetz Chaim. Yeah? These are people which are Adam Chashuv. So since they're Adam Chashuv, the question is, do we say that it's Ki'ilu that the Jew is allowed to testify? Because at the end of the day, since we're somchim on this person, right? And the Batei Mishpat of the Goyim are somech on this one person. So therefore, they're allowed to take out money from him, even though it's not going to be the two witnesses, right? And therefore, we don't have to start coming and testifying, okay? Or Dilma, or maybe, that means basically what happens is that according to the Chukei Mishpat of the Kutim, we are going to be somech on the Sedut of Adam Chashuv because we're not going to suspect him that he's going to lie, just like on two witnesses. And therefore, you would say, listen, there's no problem, right? Because even the Shilton do the exact same thing. For us, it doesn't help. For us, you could have Moshe and Aaron, two brothers, coming and testifying. And what's halacha? Wallow. It's nothing. Because Moshe and Aaron are brothers. So therefore, right? So therefore, it has nothing to do with Adam Chashuv or not Adam Chashuv. You need two witnesses. And if you do not have two witnesses, and they have to be kasher witnesses, because if there's going to be a closeness between them, you could have Reb Chaim Kanievsky and his brother, right? You could have, it doesn't matter, her father and a son, it doesn't matter. For us, it doesn't matter chashuv or not chashuv, or it doesn't matter. One person, you always need two witnesses. Al pi shnei edim yakum davar.
We cannot be related.
Obviously, you can be related.
But it's not.
Amar Ravashi. Ravashi comes and he says, Hai bar Yisrael de zabin lei ar'a leoved kochavim amitzra de bar Yisrael chavreh. We know that there's a concept of dina de bar metzra. What is dina de bar metzra? If I have a house and I want to sell my house, first grabs on my house is my neighbor, my Jewish neighbor. Why? Because what happens is that maybe he wants to be marchiv his house. He wants to come. So now again, we're not talking about now for investments, because that could be something different. We're talking about that he may, listen, the family's growing, so the neighbor wants to, make his house bigger. He wants to expand. He wants to connect the backyards. He wants to put everything together, whatever the case is. So therefore, in such, yeah, but what happens now is as follows. So therefore, he has the first rights. Now, it doesn't mean that he's going to pay less, because if I'm asking for something, it doesn't mean, but if he's willing to pay what I want, so basically I have to give it to him and I'm not allowed to come and sell it to anybody else. Now, this guy came and he sold it to a goy instead of offering it to his neighbor, the Jew. So the same thing says the Gemara, we put him in Nidui. Mamash, we put him in excommunication. So says the Gemara, my tama, what's the reason? If you're going to tell me it's because of Dina de Bar Metzra, the Amar more says, right, there's a Gemara b'Metzia Kufchet Amubet, Zavin me'oved kochavim ve'zavin le'oved kochavim, right? Ve'leka mishum Dina de Bar Metzra. He says you're allowed to purchase a field from a non-Jew, and you're allowed to sell a field to a non-Jew, and there's no problem with Dina de Bar Metzra, which means the Bar Metzra cannot come and take him out of the field, yeah? So he comes and he says, right? Because basically he could actually just say, which means the guy comes and he bought it from a goy. So he could come and say, yeah, but you know that I just got him away from you. I did you a favor, right? And therefore there's no
about this. You placed the
one more time. I just bought it. You have a goy living beside you.
Okay.
You actually wanted to buy it, but I could buy it from the goy. Now you're going to tell me, one second, but I wanted to buy the field. Right? It belonged to a goy. Remember, not to a Jew.
So the way we're talking about it, only Jews have this law, not a goy.
1 second. But the question is that I'm allowed to come and tell you the fact that I did do ve'asita yashar ve'atov. What do you learn about Dina de Bar Metzra? Ve'asita tov ve'yashar, which means you have to do what's good and straight.
Beyond the letter of the law.
I went and I did it. You know why? Because beforehand you had somebody that could damage you, right? It was somebody that could damage you. I came and I got rid of him, right? I went and I bought the field myself.
Excuse me. What does this have to do with this law? Because it only applies to Jews, not
one more time.
A goy doesn't have to sell to a Jew first.
No, but the Jewish buyer can come and ask you, you're the neighbor, do you want to buy it first?
Basically, right now, if you have the concept of Dina Bar Metzra, you should also be able to come and tell me, the Jew that's buying it, listen, this is a property beside me. I also want this property. You should do what's good, and therefore let me buy the property, not you buying the property.
The Jew has an affirmative duty, if he can, to assist the neighbor of a goy.
It says the Gemara, 1 second, if you're buying from a goy or selling to a goy, there's no problem with Dina de Bar Metzra. Okay? We already just explained why exactly, right? And the same thing, if you're going to sell a field to an Oved Kochavim, there's no halacha. Because the Din of Bar Metzra is mutal ala koneh, lo ala mocher. It's only on the one which is purchasing it and not on the one which is selling it. Because the mocher, the selling it, is not mazik anybody when he's selling his property. It's the koneh, the buyer, right, which is actually coming to do this, right? Because that way, obviously, so therefore, it's not on the seller, it's on the buyer. So anything, that means the second that we put a goy there, there's no Dina de Bar Metzra. Even if the Jew is buying from the goy, so there are technically I should have dina bar mitzvah, but it's a buyer, and the buyer is a Jew. There you could also say, I'm doing you a favor. I'm getting rid of the line. But even if the Jew is the one selling to a goy, there's also no dina bar mitzvah because it's not on the seller, it's on the buyer. So says the Gemara, Ella, but rather, Damnina lay, right? The Bala Sadek could tell the seller, Arba'it li arya mitzray. Why did you bring me on a lion to my property? Right? Which means you caused me to have a lion right beside me. So because you came and you caused me to have a lion right beside me, right? What's going to happen? You are actually going to be obligated nidui. We put you in nidui because you put a lion right by my property. Okay? So says the Gemara, Meshamtina le, ad kabila le kol unsa de ati mechamate. We put him in nidui until he accepts upon himself any onus whatsoever that would happen because of the buyer. Which means even if in 5 years now comes this lion, which is living right beside me, and he's going to do, I don't know what type of a shtut, and it damages, the other Jew, the seller, would have to come and pay it. That means we put him in nidui until he accepts upon himself all liabilities, anything that's happening. Okay?
So this obligation is primarily on the buyer.
Says the Mishnah, Kuf Yudaled Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Natnu mochsin et chamoro, venatnu lo chamor acher. Imagine right now these mochsin, these collectors of taxes and all these things, they come, they take his chamor, and then they come and they give him, right, another one. Yeah, it was worse, obviously. It was inferior, but they gave him another one. Okay? Now, obviously, these mochsin are people that take shelo kalacha, as we already mentioned, meaning that they were taking, whether it's talking about without kitzbah, right, without any fixed amount, or we were talking about that they appointed themselves, right? Or natlu listim et ksuto, venatlu lo ksuta acheret, or there were bandits that they went and they took his clothing, but they gave him something else, meaning that you had a good, $1 million shirt, but they felt bad that they were going to mamash like leave you without anything, so they come and they give you a 50-cent shirt, but they give you something else. Harelu shelo, they belong to him, so they belong to you. Why? Because obviously the baalim, they already do yush, and therefore since it was yush plus shinui reshut, so therefore you acquire it. Okay. Next, hamatzil min ha'na'ar o min ha'gayis o min ha'listin. If right now you saved something from the river, meaning all of a sudden you come to the river, you find a lost object, you find something there, right? So you took it, or from the chelat tzava, from the soldiers, or min ha'listin, or from listin, from bandits, im nitiashu ha'be'alim. If right now the be'alim, they already gave up hope on it, harelu shelo, they belong to you. The same halacha would apply that if you have a whole bunch of bees that they came out of their beehive, right, and it was lost, and then somebody came and he found it, right, it belongs to him. Okay, that means they ran away from their beehive, they went to the forest or whatever it is, and they said they're not going to get it back. That's it. And then somebody else came and he took all the bees, so they belong to him. Okay, next, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Ne'emenet isha o katan lomar, mikan yatsa nachil. Do you know that even a woman or a child or a minor can come and say that they're allowed to say that they came from here, meaning that this is where, right? That here we're talking about
where they originated or where they were found.
No. That they came from here. It came. That means basically we're going to give it back to the original owner. Okay. Right? And he comes and he says, it's going to come out, right? That means basically, if somebody came out from the kvarto and then he passes through the field of his friends, so the Bala Nechil is allowed to come in order to save them. So imagine all the bees started running. They started running through my property. They got to your property. I could go to your property to bring back the bees. The mizik. Now, what happens if they actually came and they damaged something upon the way? So Meshalem Ashizik. Yeah, he has to pay that which he damaged. Aval lo yakotz et socho, but he cannot come and cut down, for example, a branch of the tree. Let's say all the bees, they come and they start coming on a branch. So you can't cut down the branch and start taking it. You can't do that. Right? Why? Because at the end of the day, if it's my property, you're going to come, you're going to start cutting down my branches to take my branches to your thing. Right? I understand. Even if you want to pay for it, doesn't help. Okay, that you're not allowed to do. Bishmael ben Osher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Bishmael ben the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, Af kotzetz v'noten. No, you're actually even allowed to come and cut down the branch, right, with the bees, take it back to your place, right, put the bees back inside and all that, and then you come and say, here's your money. What was the value of the branch, whatever it was, here it is, take it. So that's a machloke between Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara is going to come and analyze the Mishnah, and it says like this: Tana, right? So we learned im natal machzir le'ba'alim rishonim, which means if right now the guy took right the chamor from these mochsim, so he has to actually give it back to its original owners. Okay, but it's shelo, it's his. So 1 second. So kasavar yush kadi lokani. So he wants to say that yush by itself is not going to be koneh. Umikara, right, and therefore from the beginning, when the chamor came to his hands, it came bisur. And therefore, since it came bisur, he has to actually give it back. So according to this Tana, this Braita, you have to actually come. Imagine, they came, they took your chamor. They gave you another chamor, right? But it was an inferior chamor. So imagine what type of chamor you got, right? So what happens? Now all of a sudden, you have to give it back. Why do you have to give it back? Because yush by itself is nothing. And since when it came to you, right, it's considered that it can be isur, right? So therefore, that's it. Okay?
And he didn't do any change on it or pay for it.
No, he didn't do anything. They just gave it to him. Okay? So now he comes and he says, that's one way in explaining, huh? No, the shinui the shoot, it's not what he's saying over here. He says because it came to his hands already be isur. So therefore, it's a little bit different. That's what we're saying over here.
This time is saying
Okay.
a change of domain doesn't help.
Yeah. Now he comes and he says like this. He says, "V'ika damri," but there are other people that explain the Braita that they say no. Im balachsid yachzir leba'alim harishonim. Right? He says if you want to give it back, you give it back to the original owners. Okay. He says, my tama, what's reasoning? Yush kadikani, you do acquire it. Miu imamar ifshi b'mamon sheno sheli. But if he says, listen, but I don't want something that doesn't belong to me. Machzir leba'alim harishonim. So he does come and he gives it to the ba'alim harishonim. Okay? 1 second. So, if basically the difference between the first Braita and the second Braita was that in the first Braita it says it's an obligation, meaning that he's actually saying that he's obligated to give back to the first owners, and the second Braita was in balachsi, if he wants to give it back, he has to give it back to the original owners. And then again, we're talking about because he just says that EFC, I don't want to have money which is not mine. Yes. Says the two dots. Are elu shelo mipnei she'ba'alim, right? So he says over here it belongs to him. Why? Because the ba'alim, they already had yush. So Amar Rashi comes and he says, Lo shanu ela listim oved kochavim. What are we talking about? We're talking about that the owners are having yush only because the listim or listim of det kochavim. They are of goyim. Aval listim Israel. When we're talking about listim Israel, no, we don't say that they're going to have yush. Savar lemachar nekid lebedina. But he thinks tomorrow I'm going to take him to bedin. Meaning, if it's a goy, so then you're right, he's going to have yush. But if it's a Jew, I'm going to take him to bedin. Don't worry about it. Not today, but tomorrow. So there's no yush. So Matkif, Rav Yosef comes and he asks the following question. Adra, but the opposite. Ipcha mistaber, the exact opposite. Ovdei kochavim tedaine begite. Since the ovdei kochavim, they come and they judge with gava and koach, right? So he says, lo miyaesh. The nigzal is never going to be mityaesh, right? So he comes and he says, right, and therefore, right, he could actually go to the bet mishpat of the goyim, and they're going to be sumech on the gava of their svara that they actually want to come, even without the proper witnesses, they want to take it out to show that they're the boss. So they're going to come, they're going to take it out of their hands.
I'm not getting it.
Yeah, one more time. Oved kochavim, since they are haughty, so
Goyim.
they do not.
Goyim?
Yes, oved kochavim is a goy. Yeah.
Goyish.
All right. So therefore, when they're going to come, they're going to judge. They're not going to need all the specifics and all the proofs 100%. They come and they say, listen, with the haughtiness, you come and say, nah, you know what? You're obligated. Pay it back. So therefore, it's much easier to get the money back through the Goy court than through the Jewish court. Because the Jewish court, you need the witnesses, you need the this, you need that, you need the due diligence. The Goy court, they come with their gava. They're going to say, pay. To show, right? That's what you're doing. What? Who's someone giving back to the goy? The goy stole from you. Yes, the goy stole from you. The goy stole from you, so therefore we say that you do not have any, how do you call this? You do not have any use. Why don't you have a use? Because the opposite, you're going to come, you're going to get it back from the bedin, the goyim. But Israel, however, though, by a bedin of Israel, right, we'll never actually come and force him to do it bekoach, right? Israel, kevan de amri mima, we only tell him to do it, but we never force them to do it, right? Which means even if we would come and take him to a bedin of Israel just say, you're obligated to pay back. But they never take it bekoach. Right? The bedin never come and they take it with strength. You understand? So, therefore, right? No. He says, since they do not take it with strength, yes.
The Jewish court does have a coercive community. Back then, they didn't have a coercive community.
So he comes and he says like this. But if it was actually stated, it was saying on this on the Seifa. Hamatzil mina gais u'min. You're right. You take out the gudakum. If you're going to save it from the soldiers and from the bandits, so you need Yashua Balim in, right? If they had Yush, then yes. But Stama, if there was no Yush, lo. Lo shanu ela obed kochavim, that's only going to be when with the goyim. It means the listim is a goy. The bandits is a goy. Because they come and they judge with koach, with gava. So therefore they come, they want to force it, and they want to come and they want to show their haughtiness, that even if they don't know, I think that this is the way that it is. Aval listim Israel, but if it's going to be a Jew, kevan de amni meimar, since Bedin would only come and just say it, yaesh, they will have use. So you're right. We actually did change, meaning we changed the Gemara because of Rav Ashi. Because of the question of Rav Ashi, we actually did change the Gemara. And therefore it comes out that there's a difference between a Jew and a Goy, and the exact opposite of what we thought at the beginning. We thought at the beginning that he would have given up hope if it belonged to the Goy, and if it was belonged to a Jew, he thought tomorrow I'm going to go to Beti. It's the exact opposite. If it belongs to a Goy, he could go to the Bet Mishpat. Right? If it belongs to the Jew, meaning the Jew was the listin, not belongs, and the Jew was the listin, then it's not going to help anything. So therefore, he's going to be miyayesh. Okay? Tznan hata. We come and we learned over there in a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim. Orot shel balabait mahashava metamatan. Okay? What does that mean? We're talking about right now the orot of balabait that he uses for himself, and he's not going to sell it. The machshava metamatan, which means the machshava to use them helps it becoming fit for tum'ah, which means that if he's going to sell it until then, it's not going to be fitting for tum'ah. But the second that he makes it like a utensil that now he's going to use it, it's going to be fitting for tum'ah. V'shel abdan. Now, if it's going to be me'abed orot, right, and machshava metamatan, the machshava is not going to be metameh. Shel gazlan, right, of a gazlan. So the abdan is the one who's a tanner, that he's me'abed orot. He comes and he does all these, so he usually sells it. So the machshava, the balim is not going. Why? Because it could be that he's actually going to sell it afterwards. Okay? Of a gazlan and machshava metamatan. By the gazlan, it's not going to be metameh. But the orot of a ganav, the machshava is metametan. Which means, right, let's just understand like this. In order for a chefetz to be mekabel tumah, it has to be a keli, that's a utensil, which means that you're able to use it for a certain purpose. So he comes and he says like this. He says, right, right until now, it's nothing. It's not mekabel tumah, but it's nothing. Right? You didn't do anything. However, though, when you come and you put a machshava to it, that you want to use it for a certain purpose. So, for example, you have or be'ema, so now you're going to make it, for example, shoes. So it's not going to be mekabel tumah until you finish the melacha. But the second that you come and you say, you know what, it's going to become a carpet. Now, a carpet, you don't need to do anything else to it. It's already the flat skins, and therefore you don't need to. So therefore, even without doing it, it all of a sudden becomes a keli through the machshava, meaning through your mindset. And now you said, I'm going to use this now as a carpet. That already becomes mekabel tumah now. Why? Because now that's a utensil. Okay, and therefore it's fitting to be mekabel tumah. So now the Gemara is going to explain that when do we say does it become mekabel tumah or not? So one more time, when we're talking about a balabait, so the second that he thinks that now he's going to use it as a carpet, So therefore, it's Mekabel Tumah, just with his thought. He didn't have to do it right away. He thought, I'm using it as a carpet, Kaddish, Mekabel Tumah. Abdan, no. Why? Because since he's a tanner, even if he thinks that now I want to use it for a carpet, he could change his mind 2 seconds later and then make out of it shoes or make out of it anything that he wants. So therefore, it's not going to be Mekabel Tumah. A Gazlan is Mitamatan. Why? Because he says over here, since the Baalim know who is the Gazlan, they're not going to be Miyaesh, but rather they want to grab it back from him. But they know who it is. Remember, the Gazlan is in front of the guy's face. A Ganav is behind the guy's back, so they don't know who the Ganav is. But the Gazlan it is. So therefore, since they're not Miyaesh, so therefore he doesn't acquire it, right? So if it doesn't help his Machshava. But a Ganav, he does, because the Baalim are going to be Miyaesh. Rabbi Shimon says, Chiluf Advarim, the exact opposite. A Gazlan is, right, Machshava Metamatan, but a Ganav is not. Why? Because the Baalim were not Miyaesh, right, in this circumstance. That means Rabbi Shimon holds the exact opposite of the Tanna Kamma, and he says the Gazlan, when he took it, right, they cannot come and stand in front of him because basically they're going to have Yush immediately because obviously he's such a strong and thing. There's nothing what you could do. But Gneva, so that's going to be okay. Okay, that means what does that mean? That means basically it's not going to be Miyaesh. So Amar Ula comes and he says, this machloket, right, that we just said here, is bistam. We're talking about stam gneval gezel, right? That we don't know if the Baalim had yush or not. And therefore there's a machloket. Do we say that they had yush or didn't have yush? Okay? But aval biyadua. But if it's known that the Baalim had yush, the divrei hakol according to everybody, yush kani. Right? The yush is going to be koneh, and therefore even according to Rabbi Shimon, or by gezelah, right? Geneva by Shimon and gezelah by Tanna Kamma, it's going to help.
Are they acquiring it with yours alone, or is there a change of domain?
No, yush.
But I thought we need something else, like a payment, or we require a change in the item somehow, or a change of domain.
No,
something.
well, there is going to be also a change of domain, but it's going to be yush here in this case. So Rabbi comes and he says, right, as follows. He says, biyadua, we're talking about that it is actually known. And that's still the machloket between them. Meaning, it's not only just a machloket bistam, elafiru biyadua, meaning it's known that they had yush, it's still going to be a machloket between, right, Rabbi Shimon and the Tanna Kamma. Okay? Fine. So, Amaleh Abaye le Rabba, one more time, it was a machloket between Ula, right, and Rabba. So Abaye comes and he tells Rabba, Lo tiflog ale de Ula, right? Why don't we just say, don't argue on Ula. It's not matnitin kavateh, because we learned a Mishnah exactly like him. Lefi shelo nitiyashu habalim. We said that the Baalim are not going to be mityash. And there we're talking about an Ganav. Ta'ama, they didn't nitiyashu Baalim, it's only because they didn't mityash. Aval nitiyashu Baalim, but if the Baalim be'emet, yeah, you want to turn on the... He says, but nitiyashu Baalim, harelu shelo, right? They belong to him. So if it belongs to him, so we have a Mishnah mefureshet, like Ula. So what are you arguing? It's a Mishnah like Ula. So Elmaleh, so that's what we're going to see now. Elmaleh, Anan, he says, we are not going to say, not because Shelo Nityashu, not because they didn't have Yush, because Be'emet, we want to change that Mishnah. We thought that in the Mishnah over there in Kelim, it was written, right? It was written over there, the words, right? Lefi Shelo Nityashu Abalim. Mashma, that there was Yush Abalim. It's going to be different. Now we're going to change it. We're going to teach in the Mishnah, Lefi she'en Yush LaBe'alim, which means even if we hear that there was Yush, it's not Yush. Yeah? Even if we hear that there was Yush, it's not considered Yush. Okay? So he comes now and he says, right, like this. So basically by changing the Mishnah's, the text of the Mishnah, we answered up that the Mishnah is not going anymore according to Ula. It could also go according to Rabba. Because according to Rabba, we said that even if you did have Yush, there's a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Tanna Kamma. So now we're saying, why do you say that? Because if you change the wording and you say, not because they didn't have Yush, but rather because it's not considered Yush Abalim, which means that even if there was Yush, it doesn't matter, right? So in such a case, we're going to say that this could also go according to Rabba, that even if we know that there was Yush, there's still going to be a machloket between the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Shimon. Okay? Tanan. We learned in a Mishnah that we learned in our Mishnah that if you took right now, the Mochsin took the Chamor, and then they gave you another one. So says the Gemara, Mani, who's our Mishnah going like? right? Because remember, we saw at the beginning of the Gemara the exact opposite. We saw that if right now somebody took your chamor, we're talking about moches, so you have to actually give it back to the Baalim Rishonim. Or if you wanted to give it back to the Baalim Rishonim, but who's our Mishnah then? The Mishnah says you keep it. Who is that? Mani. Ira banan. If you're going to tell me it's like Chachamim, which is Tana Kamma of the Mishnah, okay, which is talking about that only by a ganav the Baalim are mityashim. So kasha gazlan. So then you have a question about gazlan, which is the moches, because the moches is a gazlan. He's not a ganav. He's looking in front of your face. He's taking these taxes, right? Ve'i Rabbi Shimon. Now, if you're going to tell me it's Rabbi Shimon that he says only by a gazlan there's mityash, so kasha ganav. So then you have a question listim, because in the same Mishnah you had mochsin, which mochsin are the tax collectors, which they are considered like gazlanim, and then you had the listim, right, which is going to be ganavim. So therefore, the question is, who's our Mishnah? It cannot be like Rabbi Shimon. It cannot be like Tana Kamma, right? Like the Chachamim. So what's going on there? How do we learn this exactly? So he comes and he says, Bishlema le'ula. I understand it's good according to Ula. Te'amar biyadua kani. That he actually comes and he says that it's known, right? What does that mean? That he holds that in a case where we already know that Baalim were koneh. So therefore he says, you're going to acquire it. Hachanamim, right? Biyadua. So too our Mishnah is talking about that it's Yadua. That means according to Ula, one more time. According to Ula, if everybody knew it was the machlok, it was only the stam. Avalim zeya Yadua ledivrei hakol, whether according to Rabbi Shimon or according to Tana Kamma, you're going to acquire it. So he comes and he says, Bishlema le'ula. I understand according to Ula that he says that if you know that there was already Yush, so you're going to acquire it. So to here we're talking about it was Yadua that there was Yush, and it's going according to everybody. It's according to Chachamim and according to Rabbi Shimon. But according to Rabbi, and this is the reason why we're bringing this down, was we're asking a question against Rabbi. Remember, Rabbi came and he said that even if it was going to be Yadua, it's still going to be a machloket, meaning Yadua that there was Yush of the Baalim, there's still going to be a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Tana Kamma. So he comes and he says, but according to Rabbi, da amar biyadua nami machloket, Hamani, so who's our Mishnah? It's not going to be Rabbanan, it's not going to be Rabbi Shimon. So answers the Gemara, Belistim mezuyan, veRabbi Shimon. We're talking about listim mezuyan, and we're talking about shitat Rabbi Shimon, which means he wanted to say that the listim was not a regular listim. Listim is listim mezuyan. Is a mafia, armed robbery. Armed robbery is a different. It's not a burglary. It's not a stam stealing, right? It's armed robbery. Armed robbery is usually when they come with their arms. It's completely different than a fire. It's not the same halacha. Right, that we mentioned before.
To complain about.
Yes, that's why he's saying it's like a gazlan, and therefore the entire Mishnah is talking about according to Shtat Rabbi Shimon that he says in the case of a gazlan, mistama for sure there was yush. So says the Gemara, Yachiv so hainu gazlan, so that's a gazlan. Then. So he says you're right. Trei gavne gazlan. You're right. There are two different types of gazlanim. One of them is a maches, and one of them is a listim mazuyan. You're right. There's two different types of gazlan. Meaning our Mishnah was telling us different types of robberies.
I never heard this. So you're saying now a person who comes in the middle of the night.
We're going to try to bring down another proof. Ganav, gazlan, anas. We're talking about ganav, gazlan, and ananas. Hekdesh and hekdesh. Whatever they make as hekdesh is an hekdesh. Now remember, the ganav we already know it's behind the doors, right? Behind, meaning that it's in secret. Gazlan is in front of your face. And the anas is actually by force. Okay, usually that's a gazlan. Their hekdesh is hekdesh. Their tumas truman. Their maser is maser. So who is this, obviously? If it's going to be the rabbis, so kasha gazlan. It's going to be a question of gazlan. Why? Because they only hold by the ganav there was going to be yush, not by the gazlan. And if it's Rabbi Shimon, you have a question of the ganav. So says the Gemara, Bishma leula. Again, if we keep on going according to Ula, and it's known that there was yush, and therefore it's going to be lechule alma v'yadua kani asachanami. So to hear also the exact same thing, we're going to say that we're talking about that it's known that there was yush, and therefore it's according to everybody. But according to Rabbi, that he says that even if it's going to be that it was known that there was Yush, still it's a machloke between Tana Kamma and Rabbi Shimon. So who is it? It's not Rabbi Shimon, and it's not Rabbanan. So answers the Gemara, you're right. Hachanami, here we're also talking about listim mezuyan. We're talking about that the ganav is a listim mezuyan. So you have ganav, gazlan, and then anas. And therefore it's going according to Rabbi Shimon. So says the Gemara, so one second. So Yachiv, so that's gazlan then. You just told me it's a gazlan. And the Gemara is going to answer the exact same thing. There's trei gavne gazlan. There's two different types of gazlanim. What do you mean there's two different types of gazlan? The first gazlan was just even without armed thing, but he just did it in front of your face. Now you're afraid of him, so even if he's not armed, doesn't matter. But he's stealing it right in front of your face. The other guy is mamash, the ganav that we're talking about here is a gazlan, right? But the gazlan mezuyan, obviously, we're talking about that he's actually, how do you call this? That he's armed. Okay. Or if you can answer another answer. Hamatznita, this Mishnah is Rabbi. Right? The Tanya was we learned in a Braita. Rabbi comes and he says, Omer ani ganavu ke gazlan. According to Shtat Rabbi, right? A ganav is like a gazlan. The Kaimalan, and we actually pass in Kuf Yudal Mubet, right? Ki gazlan, the Rabbi Shimon. But we actually come and we say, no, the Kavanat of Rabbi is that a ganav is like a gazlan according to Rabbi Shimon, which means, according to Rabbi Shimon, just like if you would come and you would have a yush, right? In the case of the gazlan, so too Rabbi holds by a ganav. And therefore, we can actually say that our Braita is going to Rabbi, that he holds a whether a gazlan or a ganav, as long as the Baalim or Mityashim, it's going to be okay. And therefore belongs to them. So that means when this Braita comes and it says that their Hekdesh is Hekdesh, Truma is Truma, Maser is Maser, it means that we're going according to Rabbi. That according to Rabbi, whether Ganav or Gazlan, Selam and Shos, it's a bidiyuk utodovar, and therefore, since it's going to be the same halacha, as long as they had yush, there's no problem whatsoever. Okay? 2 dots. 2 dots, Kuf Yudal Mubet, 114b. 2 dots. Gufa Rabbi Omer. Rabbi comes and he says, Omer ani, I'm going to say that a Ganav is like a Gazlan. Ibailuhu, so they're going to ask the following question. Yeah? Ki Gazlan de Rabbanan Kama. Are we saying that this is like a Gazlan according to the rabbis? Velo Kani, and really by meant he doesn't acquire it. Or maybe Dilma ke Gazlan de Rabbi Shimon Kama. We're talking about it's a Ganav like the Gazlan of Rabbi Shimon. The Kani, and therefore you are going to acquire, right, the how do you call this? These orod. Which means basically what we're asking is when Rabbi says that a Ganav is like a Gazlan, which way? A Ganav is like a Gazlan, meaning that basically it's the same halachot. Are we going like the rabbis? Or are we going like Rabbi Shimon? Okay? Because if you're going to come and you're going to tell me that it's like the rabbis, right? Sheganavu kibu gazlan according to Chachamim, so far they're not going to be koneh. But if you're going to tell me that it's like a gazlan of Rabbi Shimon, he is koneh. That means it depends which shita. So, okay, you told me Staram Shos, but which way? You told me it's the exact same case. But which way do the Ganav and Gazlan go? Does it go like the rabbis? Or are you going like the Rabbi Shimon? Which way? So, Tashema. So we're going to try to bring a proof. Right? What happened to the Muhsin came, they took your chamor and they give you another chamor. It's yours. Yeah? Money. Who's this going like? So he says, eat a banan. If you're going to tell me he's going like the rabbis, right? So therefore you have kashya gazlan. You have a question on gazlan, which is the moches, right? Why? Because even if, right, the Mishnah was teaching a case of that the Baalim were mityash. Now, if you're going to tell me that it's going to Rabbi Shimon, you have a question on the listim, on the ganav, which means either way you go, you have a question from our Mishnah, the original Mishnah, not the kelim. We're talking about the original Mishnah of the moches and the listim. Okay? So says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me now it's like Rabbi, so ke gazlan Rabbi Shimon Kamar. So then he's talking about like the gazlan Rabbi Shimon Kamar, and then he's going to acquire it. So who is it? So then it's Rabbi. So Mishum Hachi Kani, and that's why we said that he's going to acquire it. But if you're going to tell me it's like a gazlan Rabbanan Kamar, and you're not going to acquire it, so therefore our Mishnah, right, is not like Rabbi, not like Rabbi Shimon, and not like Rabbanan. It's like nobody. So what's going on then? So the Gemara says, you're right. What are we dealing with? Again, the same thing that we answered before. We're talking about listim mizuyan. So since it's listim mizuyan, there's no ganav, so there's no question. And therefore, the entire Mishnah is actually going according to Shtat and Bishimo. So says the Gemara, Yihachi, if so, that is the gazlan. Answers the Gemara the same answer we answered before. Trei gav the gazlan. There are 2 different types of gazlan. You have the gazlan, which is the gazlan, which is mizuyan, right? Listim mizuyan, and then you have the gazlan, which is not listim mizuyan. Okay? Fine. Tashima. We're going to try to bring in our proof. Haganav gazlan va'anas. We're going back to the other braita that we just said. That we said that a ganav, gazlan, and anas, if they come and they make hekdesh, it's hekdesh. Their truma is truma. Their maser is maser. Who is that? If you're going to tell me it's rabbanan, so kasha gazlan. It's going to be a question from the gazlan. If you're going to tell me it's shitat Rabbi Shimon, that he says by gazlan, so then you're going to acquire it. So then you have a question on ganav. Meaning each one has a question, whether it's going to be the ganav or gazlan. So the rabbis are always going to have the question about the gazlan, and Shimon is always going to have the question about the ganav. So if you're going to tell me now ganav is like a gazlan, the Rabbi Shimon Kamar, so that's what he said, that he acquires it. But if you're going to tell me ganav ke gazlan is like Rabbanan, so who is it? So answers the Gemara, the same answer. It's listim mizuyan and Rabbi Shimon. So we ask, but that's already gazlan, and we answer 2 types of gazlan. The same thing. Okay, fine. The Gemara now is going to answer it up, and it's going to say like this: Amale Ravashi l'Rabba, says Ravashi to Rabba. Tashema, the right to Matni Rabbi l'Rebbi Shimon berei. Rabbi taught Rabbi Shimon's son. Lo davar sheyesh bo achrayut mamash, אלא אפילו פרה חורש בה, חמור ומחמר אחריו, חייבים להחזיר מפני כבוד אביהם. You remember we learned this in the previous Mishnah. In the previous Mishnah we learned, and Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Bet, we learned, what happens if the father stole something, but, so we said that there's a difference between Gozel Ma'achil, Gozel Meniach, whether he stole and he gave it to them to eat, or he stole and he left it for them. But then we said that if he left them something that has property, for example, he left them property, davar sheyesh bo achrayut, which is like karka, so they're obligated to pay it back. Not because it's mamash karka, but even if it's going to be a cow in order to use as plowing, or it's going to be chamor mechamer acharav, they're obligated to give it back. Why are they obligated to give it back? Because of the kavod of their father. Okay? Yes. Tama, the reasoning is because of kavod of yehen. Halav kavod of yehen. Let's say there's not going to be any kavod of the father. So maybe you would say no. So Shema Mina, we want to learn from here that Rabbi Gazlan Rabbi Shimon. That Rabbi was learning a ganav is like a gazlan. He's talking about like shitat Rabbi Shimon, and therefore that just like if the baalim are going to be mityayesh by a gazlan according to Rabbi Shimon, so too they're going to be mityayesh by a ganav. So Shema Mina, that's true. That is shitat Rabbi. Meaning according to shitat Rabbi, the gazlan and ganav is the same thing. And but he's going in shitat Rabbi Shimon. The second there's going to be yiyush, so he's going to come and he's going to acquire. Two dots. Okay, we're talking about now the beehive and the bees that are running around. Yeah. So says the Gemara, "Mai v'chen." What does it mean v'chen? Meaning our Mishnah, right, comes and from the beginning part, right, we were just talking about muhsin, v'chule v'chule, and then we're talking about matzil min nahar, and then all of a sudden, right, which means that you're saving from the river, and all of a sudden it says v'chen, and also. What's also here? What's going on exactly? Yeah? So he comes and he says, this is what he means to say. Afinu nachil shel dvorim de kinyan midrabananu. Right? Even if we're talking about nachil shel dvorim, that the kinyan is only going to be a kinyan drabanan. What does that mean, a kinyan drabanan? Mikar adin, right? He says these are all it's all hefker. You cannot make an acquisition on bees. Bees don't belong to you, even if they're on your property. They don't belong to you. But he says it's a kinyan drabanan that they belong to you. So he comes and he says, even this nachin shel dvorim, there's only a kinyan drabanan. I would have thought to say, since you could only acquire me drabanan, so afilu stama, it's already considered yush. Kamashmalan comes teach you that only if it's in nityasho balim, then yes, and if not, no. It's, for example, I'll give you an example, right? For example, a child. A child does not make a kinyan. So let's say it's a child and he picks up something and he says, it's mine.
You don't give a lola benesrik to a child.
That's a little bit different, because there they can't, like, you can give it back, right? You can acquire it back. But the thing is like this. So now what happens is, since he cannot really make a kinyan over here, so therefore, technically speaking, if you took it from him, there's no really sur mina Torah. The only thing is, there's the shalom bait, how do you call it? Some bait, but the shalom, meaning because of darkei shalom, you're not allowed to grab it from the thing, because if not, the father will come, punch you out, and then you start getting into the
same with the bees.
Yes, so the same thing with the bees, meaning that the bees is only a drabanan type of a kinyan that they could acquire it, because they cannot make a kinyan doraita on bees. Bees, you cannot make a kinyan doraita. So I would have thought to have a meaning. Listen, since it's only yours midrabanan, so therefore, even without yush, stama, I say you're already miyaesh. And therefore, that's it. So no, dafka if you had yush. If you do not have yush, right, we do not say that the person is going to acquire it. So next, ma? No shomea. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, ne'emenet isha bekatan. So a woman and a child is believed to say that the bees came from here. Yeah? So says the Gemara, ask the Gemara, isha bekatan benedit. One second, what? They could testify. What's going on over here? So Amar Rabbi Yudah Shmuel, says Rabbi Shmuel, Hachmaskin, what are we dealing with? Right? What happened is that the owners are running after the bees, right? And the Isha v'Katan mesechin lefi tuma, and the Isha v'Katan are being mesiach lefi tuma. Mesiach lefi tuma was a terminology in the Gemara which means that they're speaking innocently. They're not giving testimony. They're just talking. They say, you want to hear something so funny? I just saw Richard running after some bees over there. One second. What did you just say? They didn't testify. They didn't come to a bedin and say, by the way, we're giving testimony. No, stop, they're talking, they're saying. We just, yeah? So he comes, no, with the samach also. So he says, ve'omer, and we're going to say, mikan yatsa nachil zeh. And therefore, right, obviously, they're saying, they saw the bees run out of his property, and they saw him running after it. They found it amusing. So since they weren't testifying, that's what we're believing. It was because of testimony. They're not allowed to testify.
They got no
right?
axe to grind.
Yes. We cannot accept the testimony. Okay? So the Gemara is going to bring us a story also about Masechet Lefitumo. It says, Amar Rav Ashi, en Masechet Lefitumo kasher, ela le'edut isha bilvad. Do you know that Masechet Lefitumo is only going to be kosher for things that have to do with a woman to permit that she's going to get married.
Right.
Which means that if all of a sudden a katan comes and he says that he saw this guy that died, we're also going to permit a woman to get married, even through the katan. So imagine, a katan comes, he says, we believe him. Let her get married. Sa'ama le'Ravina le'Rashi, says Ravina to Ravashi, right? Velo, he comes and he says, what? No, but we didn't find such a case. He comes and he says, 1 second, but what about nachil shel dvorim? It's also Masechet Vitumo. So therefore, what's going on here? If you're going to tell me that it's only for things which is going to be for the women, which means to permit her to get married because of a guna, that we want it to be more lenient, here it's money matters. What's going on? Answers the Gemara, Shane Nechil Shel Dvorim, the Kinyam D'Rabbanan. The same thing. Since, again, we're going back to the same Yisod beforehand. Since the Nechil Shel Dvorim is only Kinyam D'Rabbanan, the rabbis were lenient that we're going to believe a child or a woman, Masechet Vitumo, in order to give it back to them. Okay? So ask the Gemara, Umidoraita lo, what, you never somech on Masechet Vitumo, Midoraita? Right, there was a person that he was Masechet Vitumo. And he said, Zechurani keshani tinok. I remember when I was a child, Mulkavani al ketefo shel Abba, I was on my father's shoulders. He took me out of the Bet Sefer. He took off my clothing. He and he took me in the mikveh. To eat truma in the nighttime. And my friends were porsim lingoabi, meaning that my friends could not touch me. They used to call me Yochanan, eater of the breads. Do you know that Rabbi came and he made him a kohen?
They're establishing him as a kohen.
They're making
no, but he didn't.
Exactly.
He was just telling
they're
some
doing
story.
It because of Masechet Lefitumo. Now this is even doraitas. We're not talking about Rabbanans. So answers the Gemara, no, you're right. It could only be the Rabbanan. So therefore we're talking about Truma the Rabbanan.
Probably just
meaning we're not talking about.
In other words, they're not going to let him go in the
exactly. That's why only the Rabbanans. Anything which is the Rabbanan, which means Truma the Rabbanan, that's the only thing that they actually came because of the story. Meaning because of the Masechet Vitumo, they can't make him into a doraita, but they can make him into the Rabbanan. So therefore Truma the Rabbanan, he's allowed to eat just because of the story, but not anything doraita. So ask the Gemara, V'akati ben doraita lo, but you're still going to tell me doraita no? V'akiyat Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, right, he says over here to Bavel, he said, Amar Rav Chana bar Tigna, ve'amilan, some people say it's Rav Acha bar Katagina. Mishtay Maaseh bar Lifnei Yeshua, there was a story, right, that came in front of Yeshua ben Levi. Ve'amilan, some people say in front of Rabbi. Ve'tinok echad shem Masechet Vitumo v'amar, ani ve'imi nishvenu levenu avdei kochavim. He went and he said that he was captured with his mother between the goyim. Yeah, yatzati lishov ma'im, tati limi. Ilkot etzim, tati alimi. Yeah, what happened was he was always thinking about his mother, which means that he never left, right? His mother, he was always like calling, watching that to make sure nothing actually happened to his mother. Rabbi got married to a Kohen. Now we know, sorry, that if a goy has relations with a woman, a Jewish woman, right? She's a surah l'keuna. He makes her into a zonah. So therefore, shvuya, normally speaking, it's a presumption that she's a zonah, and therefore she cannot get married to a Kohen. She cannot get married to a Kohen. So here, the Masechet Lefitumo was, again, we're talking about a katan, and the katan is actually Masechet Lefitumo, that he made sure that the mother, nothing happened to her, and all of a sudden Rabbi comes and he gets the mother married. And now, what's going on over here? Answers the Gemara. Now there it is Doraita, because a Kohen cannot get married to a Zonah. It's Doraita. Answers the Gemara. Mishvuyahe kiluno. There was only a presumption, right? Don't assume. Yeah, you heard, Richard?
Assume.
Why don't you assume? Right? Fine. He comes and he says like this, right? 2 dots. Yeah, we were going to be aval lo yakotz. Okay, so he comes and he says now, right, like this. Yeah, Tanya. Aval lo yakotz etzocho. So he said, you cannot cut off the branch and then you bring in the money. That was a machloket between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and his son, Rabbi Ishmael. So Tanya, we learned to the right? He says, Rabbi Ishmael ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka omer, תנאי בית דין הוא שיורה לתוך שדה של חברו וקוצץ סוחו של חברו להציל לנחילו. Right? ונוטל דמי סוחו מתוך נחילו של חברו. Right? He says there's a תנאי בית דין. You know what the תנאי בית דין is? בית דין come and they make a condition that he's allowed to actually come and to go into his fields, his friend's field, cut off the branch, and then he's going to come and he's going to take the money. Right? ותנאי בית דין הוא שיהיה שופך ינו ומציל דושנו של חברו ונוטל דמי ינו מתוך דושנו של חברו. I have a barrel of wine. I come and misken, right? Let's say Michelle all of a sudden his barrel of dvash breaks. So I'm allowed to pour out my wine, pick up with my barrel, empty barrel now, the dvash, and then I could actually charge him, right, for my wine with his dvash. So it's Tanai Betin.
Right.
Yeah? These are all Tanai Bedins. Okay? So he comes and he says, Tanai Bedin, there's another Tanai Bedin, right? Right? That basically what happened was that imagine right now I have a whole bunch of wood on top of my hamor. And I've got my friend that has pishtan. And all of a sudden his hamor dies. Misken. Right? So the hamor dies. So I'm allowed to actually come and be mifareket etzav to mishtano chavero. I can take the money. Tmei etzav mitok mishtano shel chavero. Shal menat ken nichil Yoshua liYisrael et haaretz. Because on this condition, right, Yoshua came and he made these takanot. These takanot we already learned on Daf Pei. Right, to pay Amud Bet, to pay Aleph Amud Aleph, the different takanot. So we learned all these different takanot that you're allowed to come and to use. Mishnah. Okay, Mishnah Kuf Yudalad Amud Bet. Towards the bottom. We're almost done. It says the Mishnah, Makir, Kelav, Usfarav, Yadachet. Imagine right now, I'm coming, and all of a sudden I say, hey, that's my Keli. That's my Sefer. What's going on? And it's in your hands. So I come and I say, excuse me, this is mine. V'yatzalo Shem Gneva Ba'id. And there was a call that this guy is a ganav. Yeah, there was a call. This guy's a ganav. Yishavalo kama natan, v'itol. He swears. How much did he take? Yeah, kama natan. And then he's going to take it. Yeah, he's going to take the mechid. Right? He has to give it back. Okay? Bimlav. Now, what happens if he doesn't have a Shem Gneva? Lav kolemenu. Right? He says, we do not have the koach. Right? He says, liton, that it was stolen. Shani omer, because I'm going to say, that if you sold it to somebody else, ulkachan ze'emenu, right? And then you're going to purchase it, right, from the Baalim Rishonim. Fine. So one more time, right? This is a very interesting Mishnah. If he has a Shem Ganav, he swears, right? How much did he pay for it? And then he takes that price and he has to give it back. And if not, which means there's no Shem Ganav, so you can't do that because listen, you're going to say, right? I'm going to say that it was never stolen. Okay? And then he sold it to somebody else, and then this guy bought it. Fine. Says the Gemara. What do I care if he has a Shem Geneva Ba'ir? Right? What do I care now? Shem Geneva Ba'ir, no Geneva Ba'ir. What does it help? So he says, right? Right? He says, why don't we suspect that he sold the kelim? Yeah? And now he's coming and saying that it was stolen, and therefore, that's it. Meaning, why don't we suspect that Bemet he sold it? And once he sold it, that's it.
The owner.
Right? The owner sold it. Yeah, exactly. The owner sold it. Now he's mitcharet that he sold it. And now, hey, it comes out of Shem Ganav Ba'ir. He stole it from me. He sold it. So, Amar Rav Yudah Rav says Rav Yudah Rav, Kegon Shabau Bnei Adam Betoch Beto, right? They came to his house. Ve'amad v'ivkin balayla, right? And all of a sudden, right, he comes and he starts screaming, right? That basically that they stole. Ve'amar nignevu kelai. And he says, it was actually stolen from me. That means the orchim came and they stole. Right? Which means that sometimes it happens. They come and they're going to steal. Yeah? So says the Gemara, 1 second. If that's the case, that they came to sleep in his house, and then basically he's coming and screaming basically that they stole his things and he did it immediately, meaning that it wasn't a case that we're suspecting the really bad that he sold it and now he feels remorse. No. He's screaming. Somebody came to sleep in his house. They stole. So he says, so he says that's even more than. Why? He's coming in saying that really bad man, that kilu that they stole. He found it. He made this story up, right? He invented this story in order to come and to do this. So therefore, kilu that they stole it, and therefore that's. So Rav Kahana Meseba, he says, you're right. No, what happened was that there was already the tunnel going to the house. And there were people that were coming out of his house, and they had a whole bunch of things on their shoulders. And everyone was saying after they saw him come out from the Machteret, that there were things that were stolen from him. Meaning, when you come and you see that these guys are coming out in such a fashion, you probably suspect that really be'emet, this is a really be'emet gneva, right? So says the Gemara, "V'dilima kelim avu tzfarim lo avu." He says, okay, fine, but maybe it was kelim, but not tzfarim. Whoever, maybe the tzfarim were not be'emet stolen, because again, he said that it was a kelim and the tzfarim. That was a mishnah. Hamakir kelav usfarav. So Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan kegon dekamni nami tzfarim. He says, no, you're right. They saw the tzfarim also there. That means they saw the kelim, the tzfarim. So they said, it's this. Yeah, the guy came and the guy stole it, and therefore we have to give it back to him. Okay, so ask the Gemara, says maybe the Ganavim, they took out small Sfarim and he's asking for big ones. Yeah, maybe they take out something small and you're coming, you're saying, oh, it was a big thing. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef Chanin, the Kamni Sefer Ploni. He said, no, he actually said which Sefer, meaning he knows exactly what we're talking about over here. Okay, and therefore this was actually what they saw. They saw this Sefer coming out. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. If you're going to tell me that you can't differentiate between size, maybe he took out an old one and he wants a new one. Imagine they're taking something out, it was already secondhand, but the guy's coming and saying, no, I had a new book, it was never opened. Yeah, it was never opened. So Amar Rabbi Avu says, the ones that they were seeing that it was coming out, they actually recognized the books. And they say, this is actually what they were taking out from the house. They recognize it. Therefore, that's what they're saying. So says the Gemara, does Rav actually say that? Rav says, patur. If you have a case of Baba Machteret, and then he comes out with kelim, he's going to be patur to give it back. My time, what's the reasoning? He bought it with his blood. Right? Meaning, the fact that they could have killed him, and he took the risk, it's his. It belongs to him. So answers the Gemara, Haniminu, one of these words, the Kananahu. Right? That he says shekonet kelim shegana. Right? But Baba Machteret, the Mikara Masar Nafshel Ektala, that at the beginning he already put himself to get killed. Right? That's going to be the Kananu Baba Machteret Mikara Masar Lektala. Valhani, but these guys, since they didn't come Bamachteret, meaning these guys, they came to his house, Kilu was I'm your guest. And all of a sudden they come and they stole, they took things out. You know how it is. You come with the empty mizvada and all of a sudden the mizvada is much heavier. You understand? All of a sudden, hey, what's going on? Right? They say that joke about people that they go to the hotels and all of a sudden you open up the luggage and it's empty. They're like, hey, all of a sudden they leave. It's a heavy. They took everything. They took the bragin. They take everything that you're able to take off. Boom! They took everything from the hotel and they left. Yeah. So same thing. He says, if it was Baba Machteret, you're right. They gave up his life, meaning that the guy could have killed him. So the fact that the guy could have killed him, now he's going to take out kelim. He acquires those kelim with his blood. That yes, right? Because they could have killed him. But here, they come. The guy did you a favor. Yeah, you want to stay by my house? With Chavod, sleep him out. All of a sudden they come the next day. Oh, man. And he starts screaming, hey, what's going on over here? They emptied me out. Yeah? So, so Amar Rava. Rava comes and he says, Lo shanu ela balabayit asui limkor kelav. That's only talking about a balabayit which was made to sell his utensils. Aval balabayit she'eno asui limkor kelav. But a balabayit that was not made to sell his utensils, lo tzarich la'adure ale kulehai. You don't have to be mefaret, right? Kolkach, which means, right, the people that were seeing, right, they don't have to come and say exactly which sefarim which were stolen. He says, why? Because basically it's just enough to say that people are coming outside. Because since he was selling it, he's selling all these things. It's very difficult to come and the guys are coming out. Imagine you come a store. You think the guys are able to say, this is his? He's got millions of different books. He's coming out with you can't start testifying about this book and that book and that book. It's impossible. So in such a case, it was already just enough to say that people were coming out with their, with the things. That's already enough. Have a wonderful day, everyone.